Number 5. It happened in 2009 on November 24th. John, as a 26-year-old medical student, along with his brother Joshua and a group of friends, went to explore Nutty Putty Cave, located in Utah, USA. The weather was good and the mood was great. There was nothing to pretend trouble. All these guys were already experienced in this business, and John, despite his youth, had already been in caves many times. It turns out that Nutty Putty is not just a cave, but a real maze with narrow passages where you have to literally squeeze between the rocks. The group descended into the cave and began exploring its passages. At one point, John decided to try to crawl through a narrow passage called Cookie. This passage was notoriously difficult. It was narrower than 25 centimeters wide and 45 centimeters high. He began to move forward, lying on his stomach and using his arms to pull himself up, but at some point he realized he was stuck. His chest was wedged between the rocks and his legs dangled helplessly in the air. The worst part was that he was stuck head down, and as time went on, the pressure in his head began to build up. John tried to get out, but this only made things worse. Frightened, he started screaming and calling for help. Hearing this, his brother rushed to help. Grabbing John's legs, he tried to pull him out, but John found himself pinned too tightly. Eventually, the group decided to call the rescue team, but since the cave was far from town, the rescuers didn't arrive until hours later. I think you can see for yourself that lying head down in a narrow crevice with a little oxygen is hard. After looking at the situation, the rescuers decided to tie John to ropes to pull him out. It seemed to work, but at some point the rope slipped and John fell again, only deeper. He spent more than 24 hours in the crevasse. His body began to fail. His head down position was causing blood to rush to his brain, causing unbearable pain. Eventually, after 27 hours, he lost consciousness for the last time and his heart stopped. After John's death, rescuers realized that it was impossible to retrieve his body without risking a cave collapse. It was decided to leave him in the cave, and the entrance was sealed with a concrete slab, turning Nutty Putty into his grave that no one would ever visit again. Number 4. In 2021, speleologist Pavel Demidov decided to explore Veryovkin cave, which is located in Abkhazia and is the deepest cave in the world, 2,212 meters if anything. On August 1st, Pavel Demidov, being very experienced, decided as a member of a group to go to the Veryovkin cave. The purpose of the expedition was to explore and collect data that could help to better understand the structure of this giant cave. On the way back, when the group had already started to ascend to the surface, Pavel decided to separate. He needed to take additional measurements and collect data that could be useful for future research. He informed the group that he would catch up with them soon. The group, being fatigued, let Paul go without question. But soon the group became worried as Paul did not return for a long time. Communication with him broke down and his flashlight disappeared in the darkness of the cave. A search began, but the complex structure of the cave made movement difficult. The group could not find Paul on their own, so they called the rescue team. The rescuers arrived and immediately started searching. But unfortunately, after several days of searching, they found Pavel's body at a depth of 1,000 meters. They speculated that Paul may have fallen into one of the wells in the cave. No further details of his death are known. Number 3. On June 24th, 1967, a group of 6 experienced speleologists, David Adamson, John Ogden, William Fraser, Michael Ryan, Jeff Bowe, and Colin Weir, set out to explore Mossdale Caverns, located in the United Kingdom. Their goal was to explore the far reaches of the cave and find new passages. Before descending into the cave, the atmosphere among the speleologists was uplifting. They were joking and cheering each other up, even though they were aware of the possible dangers. Some of them had been to Mossdale Caverns before and knew that it was one of the most challenging and dangerous places for caving in the UK. It was pouring that day, increasing the risk of the cave flooding, but the group disregarded the warnings about the possible danger and continued their descent. At first, things were going well. The speleologists advanced deep into the cave, overcoming narrow passages. However, at one point, the situation began to deteriorate rapidly. Due to incessant rains on the surface, the water level in the cave began to rise sharply. The group had no way out. The paths they had traveled down were completely flooded. Temperatures began to drop to critically low levels, and oxygen became increasingly scarce. The group was trapped at a depth of 300 meters in total darkness. The rescue operation began as soon as it was known that the group had not returned. However, due to the flooded and complex structure of the tunnels, it was almost impossible to get through. A few days later, when the water level dropped a little, the rescuers hurried to the place where the group was supposedly located, but unfortunately they saw a sad picture. All the bodies of the group members were lying breathless. Number 2. In 1925, on January 30th in the United States, Floyd Collins, an experienced in the cave field, went to Sand Cave in Kentucky. His goal was to find a new entrance to Crystal Cave, a cave his family owned. Floyd believed that once he found a new entrance, he would attract more tourists and greatly increase his family's income. Floyd descended into the cave alone as soon as he had the idea, which makes one wonder if sufficient preparation had been made before descending. The lower he descended, the narrower the cave became, and at one point Floyd began to crawl rather than walk, for the passages became extremely narrow. When he realized that there was no way to go forward, he decided to go back, but realized realized that he was stuck. Trying to climb out, moving his feet, he dropped a stone weighing 12 kilograms, which pressed his foot in the narrow space. So he trapped himself at a depth of 17 meters. Time passed, and after 5 hours, Floyd's brothers began to wonder why their brother was missing for so long. So they decided to go and check it out. When they went down into the cave, they saw Floyd stuck in a crevice. Rescuers were immediately called, and they tried to get Floyd out. But because of the narrow passage and the rock, they could not act quickly. Floyd spent more than 2 weeks trapped, getting food and water through narrow crevices while rescuers tried to get him out. In the first few days, Floyd remained conscious and even communicated with those who tried to help him. He was handed food, water, and blankets to keep his strength up. However, with each passing day, his condition worsened. The temperature in the cave was low and the humidity was high, contributing to hypothermia. In addition, Floyd was suffering from severe pain in his trapped leg, which was beginning to lose sensation due to lack of circulation. As time went on, his consciousness became increasingly confused. He began to lose touch with reality, sometimes falling into delusions. At one point, Floyd stopped responding and moving. Then on the night of February 16th, Floyd's death was confirmed. Floyd's body was not removed and the cave was sealed. Number 1. In 1994, a group of experienced divers traveled to Zacatón Cave, Zacatón, located in Mexico. The cave, known as one of the deepest underwater mines in the world, was known for its extreme depths and challenging diving conditions. Its vertical structure, reaching more than 300 meters deep, attracted explorers. The goal of the expedition was to set a new depth record in cave diving. The team consisted of 2 people, Sheck Exley, a legendary diver with many years of experience, and his partner, Jim Bowden. The dive began in the early morning hours of April 6, 1994. Sheck Exley and Jim Bowden carefully checked their equipment, including special gas mixtures, Trimix, to reduce the risk of nitrogen narcosis at great depths. Nitrogen narcosis is a kind of intoxication not from alcohol but from nitrogen. They agreed to dive separately to minimize the risks to each other. The first stages of the dive went well. The divers descended deep into the cave, overcoming layers of water with different temperatures and visibility. At a depth of about 270 meters, the situation began to deteriorate. Sheck Exley, who by this point had already set a personal depth record, encountered unforeseen difficulties. His equipment, despite careful preparation, began to malfunction. Perhaps it was a gas leak or a regulator failure. The exact cause remained unknown. Jim Bowden, who was at a shallower depth, attempted to contact Sheck, but he did not respond. Realizing that Sheck Exley was in trouble, Jim Bowden began to ascend to the surface to request assistance. However, at this depth and under these conditions, a rescue operation was nearly impossible. Even if help arrived instantly, the chances of rescuing Sheck were minimal. Meanwhile, Sheck, left alone at extreme depths, probably tried to solve the problem on his own. But equipment damage, physical exhaustion, and nitrogen narcosis rendered his actions ineffective. His body was eventually discovered by other divers at a depth of 268 meters.
Huh?